You are about to hear Public Opinion by Walter Lippmann, performed by John Klickman. Copyright 2017, BN Publishing Online at bnpublishing.com. Public Opinion by Walter Lippmann. Part 1, Introduction. Chapter 1, The World Outside and the Pictures in Our Heads. There is an island in the ocean where in 1914 a few Englishmen, Frenchmen, and Germans lived. No cable reaches that island, and the British mail steamer comes but once in 60 days. In September, it had not yet come, and the islanders were still talking about the latest newspaper, which told about the approaching trial of Madame Callot for the shooting of Gaston Calmet. It was, therefore, with more than usual eagerness that the whole colony assembled at the quay on a day in mid-September to hear from the captain what the verdict had been. They learned that for over 6 weeks now, those of them who were English and those of them who were French had been fighting in behalf of the sanctity of treaties against those of them who were Germans. For 6 strange weeks they had acted as if they were friends, when in fact they were enemies. But their plight was not so different from that of most of the population of Europe. They had been mistaken for 6 weeks. On the continent, the interval may have been only 6 days or 6 hours. There was an interval. There was a moment when the picture of Europe on which men were conducting their business as usual did not in any way correspond to the Europe which was about to make a jumble of their lives. There was a time for each man when he was still adjusted to an environment that no longer existed. All over the world, as late as July 25th, men were making goods that they would not be able to ship, buying goods they would not be able to import. Careers were being planned, enterprises contemplated, hopes and expectations entertained, all in the belief that the world as known was the world as it was. Men were writing books describing that world. They trusted the picture in their heads. And then, over 4 years later, on a Thursday morning, came the news of an armistice, and people gave vent to their unutterable relief that the slaughter was over. Yet, in the 5 days before the real armistice came, though the end of the war had been celebrated, several thousand young men died on the battlefields. Looking back, we can see how indirectly we know the environment in which nevertheless we live. We can see that the news of it comes to us now fast, now slowly, but that whatever we believe to be a true picture, we treat as if it were the environment itself. It is harder to remember that about the beliefs about which we are now acting, but in respect to other peoples and other ages, we flatter ourselves that it is easy to see when they were in deadly earnest about ludicrous pictures of the world. We insist, because of our superior hindsight, that the world as they needed to know it and the world as they did know it were often two quite contradictory things. We can see, too, that while they governed and fought, traded and reformed in the world as they imagined it to be, they produced results, or failed to produce any, in the world as it was. They started for the Indies and found America. They diagnosed evil and hanged old women. They thought they could grow rich by always selling and never buying. A caliph, obeying what he conceived to be the will of Allah, burned the library at Alexandria. Writing about the year 389, St. Ambrose stated the case for the prisoner in Plato's cave who resolutely declines to turn his head. To discuss the nature and position of the earth does not help us in our hope of the life to come. It is enough to know what Scripture states, that he hung up the earth upon nothing. Why then argue whether he hung it up in air or upon the water, or raise a controversy as to how the thin air could sustain the earth, or why, if upon the waters, the earth does not go crashing down to the bottom? Not because the earth is in the middle, as if suspended on even balance, but because the majesty of God constrains it by the law of his will, does it endure stable upon the unstable and the void. It does not help us in our hope of the life to come. It is enough to know what Scripture states. Why then argue? But a century and a half after St. Ambrose, opinion was still troubled, on this occasion by the problem
Sample complete. Ready to continue?